Greetings, everyone. Pete Pardo here from Sea of Tranquility. Welcome to another episode of Friday Morning at the Funhouse. It's the holiday edition alongside Mr. Martin Popoff. What's happening, Martin?
Yes. Morning, sir. Morning, sir. Well, yeah, look at this is going to be an action-packed one with a lot of examples, but yeah, we're not getting that white Christmas, it looks like. It's going to be kind of warm, and yeah, out west they've got no dad can't go to the ski hill. The skiing all over. I'm watching these Whistler stories about how all the ski hills basically have no snow in BC right now. So
Yeah, I mean, there's no snow here either, although it's been cold the last couple days. But we had like all that rain last or earlier in the week and all that flooding. It was like 60, and now it got cold again. And I think we're going to be in the 40s for Christmas and Christmas Day, I think.
yeah,
And I'm not sure what next week is looking like. So I'm gonna get the snowblower ready to go because you never know, right? So I
yeah,
keep saying I'm off from work. I gotta get that thing the oil change and get it ready, and I still haven't done it yet because I'm too damn busy. But I'll get to it. I'll get to
yeah,
it.
yeah.
So speaking of getting to it, we've got lots to get to today. So as kind of like a way to wrap up the month-long solo album show that I did last month, Martin and I are going to take a look at solo albums from like a lot of different directions. We've got we haven't done one of these shows in a while where we have like a whole bunch of categories related to one theme, and we're going to give like examples of so you want to make a solo album, right? Well, here's a bunch of ways that you can tackle it. Some may be successful, some may not. And I think we'll go through a lot of these examples of ones that, hey, didn't sound all that different from the main band that they were in. Maybe went totally the opposite direction. Maybe were total disasters. Maybe in the end they really aren't solo albums, sort of. But we'll have lots of examples of all of these areas. So, and we've kind of like segmented it, and each one of us are going to take a segment. So, Martin, I don't know if you want to add to that before we get started on the first category.
Yeah, I think it'll all come out in the wash as we go through this. You'll see how these categories work out. We got a lot of props, so this is like a nice show and tell show as well. So my first category was solo albums closest to the core band. And one I just added at the last second, KK's Priest. We know that basically sounds like Priest. It's like people are comparing those two albums with Firepower right now. But one that always comes up is Don Dawkins' Up from the Ashes. You could look at the Udo band, the UDO band, as a continuation of Accept. We've talked about, I think I was going to do this for a podcast episode too. I've got some examples of the shadow band idea, right? Like the second band that's the same. So that's kind of in that direction. Two that I often think of right off the bat as of solo albums close to the core band are these two that kind of go together. Victor by Alex Lifeson and My Favorite Headache by Geddy Lee. I mean, these basically sound like Rush in the 90s. It would be interesting to see a compilation album of these two that make up and then get Geddy to sing on the Victor songs. Why not, right?
Why
Crazy
not?
ideas, right?
Sure, yeah.
And get Alex to play on the Geddy songs and make an album, like combine these two. My Favorite Victory or something like that. But so that's one. Another one that always comes up when you think of this, because you get this great comparison, is the four Kiss albums, the solo albums from 1978. Everybody likes Ace's Best because everybody says it's the closest to Kiss, and then the Paul Stanley is next. Speaking of Paul Stanley, his Live to Win album stands out as one of these that just sounds like a bunch of good Kiss songs, kind of a short album. Another one that I always thought fit in this category, Joe Perry project, Let the Music Do the Talking. Interesting. I'm just noticing that now. It just says Joe Perry at the top. Wow.
Oh, yeah.
I literally am just seeing that for the first time. What
I
does
never
the
noticed
spine
that
say?
either. Yeah.
Oh, the spine says Joe Perry project on it.
Ah,
So,
okay.
but yeah, so this just sounds like a really good Aerosmith album. Everything about it, even the vocals sound kind of Steven Tylery. The production sounds like it. But yeah, just a good solid Aerosmith album here, essentially. Ian Anderson, Homo Eroticus, Thick as a Brick 2. There you go. Chris Squire, Fish Out of Water, is I always cite it as my favorite of any Yes solo album, and it totally sounds like a Yes album. You've got that great voice. You've got that great blend of voices between Chris and Steve and John that all kind of sound semi-similar together. And so it's comforting even to hear Chris Squire sing. One I thought of, Lou Gramm. Long Hard Look.
Oh yeah, good one. Yeah.
Sounds like a Foreigner album. It's going to, because you've got that great voice. Brian May, Back to the Light. I thought that was just a good general meat and potatoes, conservatively recorded album that sounds essentially like the heavy Queen songs from the 80s. Even though it's a 90s album, but it sounds like a lot of that could have been Queen stuff. And again, you've got that comfort level of a voice that you're used to hearing in Queen singing as well. I love Brian May's voice. Another one, Jeff Martin, Exile in the Kingdom,
Oh
essentially
yeah.
a Tea Party Tea Party album. It sounds very much like a Tea Party album, but of course Jeff Martin's a super important part of that band, writer, guitarist, lead vocalist. Jerry Garcia Band, Cats Under the Stars. I mean, I've always talked about that as literally my third favorite of the entire family. That includes the Grateful Dead, because I love that period, and I love Donna God Show in that band as well. And every time you bring that up, people will say, "Oh, what about Bob Weir, Ace?" Same kind of thing. Yeah, essentially. And Jerry Garcia's got some that go off in other directions because there's too many covers on them, kind of thing. But this one sounds absolutely, absolutely like your Terrapin Station, Shakedown Street era of the band. Pete Townsend, Empty Glass, just a really good Who album, essentially. And again, the narrative, the throughput is you've got that voice you're used to hearing in the Who. Obviously Roger sings most of the stuff, but this sounds like just a really good bunch of Who songs. And of course, Pete's writing everything anyways. Mark Knopfler as well. Sounds like Dire Straits. Todd Latour, Rejoice in the Suffering. There you go. Yeah, absolutely. We love Todd. Todd's amazing. He's really, given some great new life to that band. He's a super musicologist guy, a massive fan of music. He's a talented writer, singer, drummer. So yeah, we expected good things out of that record, and it is. Warl Dane. Sadly we've lost him, but Nevermore guy, Nevermore sounding thing. Here's another one that I've always thought was kind of funny, almost just amusing, how much Jerry Cantrell, Boggy Depot, and Degradation Trip, Volume 1 and 2, that whole confusing thing. But this sounds absolutely like an Alice in Chains album. And then another one, Roger Waters, most of them, but I picked this one to flash here as a prop. Amused to Death sounds like just a great Pink Floyd album. Sounds like a cross between, I would say, Animals and The Final Cut, with probably better production than this. Probably has better production than any Pink Floyd album, although we we celebrated hugely Dark Side of the Moon the other day. But this sounds amazing. This is a great sounding record, and I mean, rivals Dark Side of the Moon kind of thing. So yeah, that's a bunch of choices for solo albums closest to the core band. I guess Pete, you've got some other honorable mentions in this category.
Yeah, one that kind of just came to mind right before we started taping is the first Ken Hensley solo album, Proud Words on a Dusty Shelf. And yeah, it's a little more mellower than some of the Uriah Heep stuff.
Good
But
call.
man, you got that voice, because Ken always sounded like David Byron, right? Their voices are so similar. He's also the main songwriter, so there's a lot of similarities here. The McVicker album by Roger Daltrey just sounds like a kicked up Who album, really good. Steve Lukather just sounds like a more rock and Toto album. In fact, it sounds very similar to the stuff that Toto was doing in the early 90s. You go back to the Genesis thing. You got Mike Rutherford's Small Creeps Day, not all that much different than what Genesis were doing. Greg Allman's got a bunch of solo albums. I think the one that sounds the most like the classic Allman Brothers is Just Before the Bullets Fly. Really strong album. He's got a really good band here.
Yep.
Anthony Ferrara, if you're watching, we'll all drink to you right now. John Anderson's Elias of Sunhillow, right? This
Yeah.
very much sounds like a Yes album. It's
Greg
all
Allman Band is such a perfect example of the shadow band situation, right?
yes.
It's like,
He
if you love
basically
Allman Brothers and you're need some more, there it is, right?
there it is. And
Yeah.
what's cool about that is the Allman Brothers at the time were really not much doing anything at all. His very first solo album is very kind of R&B soulish type of thing, but then he just went and started doing albums that were, basically Allman Brothers band albums. Here's a perfect example of this. Steve Hackett, Voyage of the Acolyte. Struggling to get the band to use his song, so he puts out a solo album, which essentially sounds like a Genesis album, and half the band is appearing on there as well. Barry Goudreau, self-titled, right? Sounds like a Boston album, not all that much different. You got the Iommi album. Yeah, there's lots of guests on here, but it still sounds like Black Sabbath, all right? Because we got Tony. It's going to sound like Black Sabbath. Fish's first album after leaving Marillion, Vigil in a Wilderness of Mirrors.
Yeah.
Not all that different from the stuff that they did throughout the 80s. And my last one here is Mark Farner, self-titled, his first solo album, and basically just essentially sounds like a really good, energetic Grand Funk Railroad album. So there you have
Sweet. Good job. Yeah.
it.
All
All
right.
right, so I will give me a quick sip here, and we're going to move on to our next category, which is basically the opposite of what we just talked about. So how about the solo albums that go furthest away from the core band? I got CDs falling off my shelf. It's like it always happens when I go pull a lot of stuff, some of the stuff that's kind of jangling out in the front.
Yeah.
So here are the albums that like the guy or the gal goes off and does a solo record and just doesn't sound anything like what they originally came for. And I think the two poster childs for this is of course the Peter Criss solo album, which I remember the first time I heard this, Martin, I was like horrified. I'm like, what in the world is this? Peter was my favorite Kiss member at the time, and I'm like, I don't like this at all, and I still don't like it at all.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I was really disappointed with Jeans as well. This just not what I expected. This big, heavy, gothic thing from Gene, and it's kind of like, let's do the Beatles and Broadway show tune type of thing. And the same token, Asshole was also another kind of weird one for him that didn't really
Yeah.
give us what we wanted from Gene. How about Freddie Mercury, Mr. Bad Guy? What in the world was that, right? It's like, holy moly. I got it here somewhere. Ian Gillan's Naked Thunder.
Yeah.
With a title like Naked Thunder, you would think that
One of
this would
those
be
out as
some
well.
big kicked up rock album. Well, it's not at all. Total misfire for Ian on that one. You got Phil Lynot's the Phil Lynott album. Again, totally not sounding like Thin Lizzy. Phil just trying to do his own thing. And we know that Phil loved kind of pop music and soul and all that kind of stuff. Robin Zander, another good example, right? It's not energetic power pop like Cheap Trick at all. You got John Lord's Elements. You got Roger Glover. I mean, any of Roger Glover's solo albums don't sound anything like Deep Purple whatsoever. I mean, Roger's got a lot of different interests outside of like the, hard rock that Deep Purple does. And you listen to any of those and you're like, all right, you know where he's coming from musically. Nick Mason, Fictitious Sports. Another one, Peter Hamill, Nadir's Big Chance. Kind of like a pre-punk album here. This totally doesn't sound like Vandergraaf Generator, even though he's got most of the band appearing on there. What else we got here? Greg Lake, self-titled debut album. Got Gary Moore on guitar. It's big hard rock, guitars everywhere, shredding guitars, and it's like, oh, that's totally not that symphonic, classical inspired progressive rock of Emerson, Lake and Palmer. You got Zakk Wylde's Book of Shadows, which is mostly kind of like an acoustic folk type thing. He did parts 1 and part 2 of that. Yep, there you go. Here's one that I still can't figure this album out. Pete Townshend's Psycho Derelict.
Yeah.
Totally weird little album, right? Very futuristic sounding and just Pete just exploring all sorts of different avenues there. Totally doesn't sound like a Who album. How about this? Play Me Out by Glenn Hughes. Deep Purple breaks up and he puts out a soul album. We all know that he loves that kind of stuff, but is that really what everybody wanted to hear? I actually, in listening to this nowadays, it's actually pretty damn good. But I remember when I first heard that, I was like, what in the world is this? Dennis DeYoung, Desert Moon. Schmaltzy pop from Mr. DeYoung. Yeah, we know he likes this stuff, but if you were, used to what was going on in Styx, a whole album of that, it's a good album though, but it's a little bit bizarre. Here's one that kind of fits and doesn't fit, Martin. Buck Dharma Flat Out. He's often been known as contributing like these more poppier songs to the Blue Oyster Cult catalog, as well as his fair share of rockers. But this is pretty mellow and not overly guitar-y. And I think he basically just saved all the stuff that he knew wouldn't go over in BOC and put it on his solo record. Kind of works. It's okay, but it's kind of strange. What else we got here? Tommy Shaw, Girls with Guns. Kind of new wavy, kind of power pop, not all like Styx. Steve Walsh, a late solo album in his catalog called Glassolalia. I mean, that's like heavy and angry and prog metal-y, not like Kansas at all. Bruce Dickinson's Skunk Works. It's kind of like Bruce's answer to the whole alternative rock and grunge scene, right? Very different from all the other Dickinson solo albums. Does not sound anything like Iron Maiden. And then a late addition here, which I thought fit really well, is John Norum's Face the Truth. So totally about face of what he was doing with Europe on like the final countdown, right before he left, and he returns with a solo album featuring Glenn Hughes that is pure pedal to the metal, heavy rock and just blistering guitars and just not all commercial sounding and very listener friendly like the final countdown was. So something totally different. I know Martin's got some
Nice.
extra ones here.
Yeah, I got some honorable mentions. I didn't think Gillan Toolbox was all that different than Naked Thunder, or better, really. And then, we've got John Paul Jones, who's making these thoughtful, very interesting. I love his singing too. Love his voice. There's just not enough of it on here. Too much of it's instrumental, right?
Yeah.
Thunder Thief as well. Great, great stuff. And then, of course, we know he works with Diamanda Gallis. So, yeah, he's way off the Zeppelin track, but his reputation actually almost like improves with this very eclectic, short, small solo career thing, right? Them Crooked Vultures as well. Stuart Copeland is another guy who's way off the Police track. He's such a thoughtful, interesting music guy. Here's the rhythmist. And then, since I was in the Joe Perry department, I thought I'd bring this out to mention. This is kind of like a crappy, it doesn't sound like an Aerosmith album, and the band is very bizarre looking, right, as well. Kind of, old rock and roll kind of look to them, sort of thing. And then, just in a general sense, you think of Bill Wyman and the Rhythm Kings. You think of the Charlie Watts Quintet from One Charlie from 91, Warm and Tender 93, doing these big bandy sort of things. Neil Peart doesn't exactly have a solo album, but he's got the Burnin' for Buddy thing, which he's the producer of and he plays on. But, that's a tribute to Buddy Rich. But Bill Bruford, we know, kind of slackening the rules here a little bit, because a lot of this is post when you're not in a band, but actually, a lot of it kind of is when he's around bands, because Bill just loves to play, right? But he goes off and does the whole jazz thing as well. And speaking of that department, Elvis Costello with his forays into jazz and classical and country and all that. That's just a guy who loves music and just wants to make lots and lots of music. So, the core band, I don't know, would you say 75% of it is new wave kind of thing? Whether it's with the attractions or
I've always
not.
had a hard time figuring out just what the hell.
Yeah. He's like the edgy Bob Dylan and Graham Parker of this world, right? He's so literary and just an amazing treasure for music, kind of thing. Andy Summers, kind of the same thing. We'll leave it at that. Let's see, put these props down. So this is kind of a touchy one. So the next category. I wanted to mention Roger Earl as well. With Roger Earl, he does his side thing, and it's kind of bluesy and rhythm bluesy or whatever. So the next category is kind of an offshoot of this one, and I even took one of my honorable mentions and moved it into this one: reputation destroying solo albums. I know that's kind of like a really strong sounding category, but we might say even reputation, chipping away at the reputation a little bit. Maybe it's not destroying in all cases, but. So I've got a few here. Where's my, let's start with that one. Yeah, unfortunately, I don't have the full of it anymore, but this is one that everybody brings up all the time. Jeff Tate, right? Jeff Tate's solo album, Tate or whatever it's called. It was The Cracks Are Showing. We're realizing he doesn't like Queensryche kind of music when he does this sort of thing, or frankly on Y2K and American Soldier as well. And an interesting case here, Mick Jagger's solo career, right? Primitive Cool and Goddess in the Doorway and Wandering Spirit, which I quite like. And I kind of like She's the Boss. Yeah, I walked around the other day listening to this one, and man, he does a lot of things on here. He's basically is trying to be the big, massive, expensive pop star on these albums. Like he's trying to do, he's definitely trying to do something that's not Stonesy, which is very different from what Keith Richards does, right? Talk is Cheap is an absolute masterpiece. I think it's amazing, right? But yeah, he definitely got a lot of stick for these albums, and it's a little bit, yeah, it did chip away at his reputation, I think, a little bit. I think he definitely got a lot of criticism. 2 from Rob Halford. This definitely caused a lot of problems. I mean, people really did not like this, and Rob basically ran with his tail between his legs away from this industrial direction that he did on this. You could think that's a whole category in itself, with Wasp trying this sort of thing as well. And yeah, speaking of Peter Criss, again, you're breaking the rules a little. He's long gone out of the band, but anything from Peter Criss, I don't know why I have 2 copies of this, but I do. I'm a glutton for punishment. But talk about really undermining his reputation. He's kind of the poster child for a solo career that is just universally not liked, right? So, and it makes you wonder, like, why he wasn't Kiss in the first place, where sometimes with these reputation destroying ones, or the ones that are far away, you start thinking, well, you were living a lie in that band. You were not even liking that kind of music, so why were you there? So were you unhappy the whole time? So that's kind of interesting. And then even on the ones where it's close to the band, it's like it's like an affirmation that band was a good place for you. You wanted to try something with other band members, but obviously you still like that kind of music. So when I moved from my honorable mentions to reputation destroying is Phil Collins. I really think that this whole thing really chipped away at his reputation. I mean, the prog guys, once this stuff started coming out and doing amazing, right, selling multi platinum, it really made people think, I think, a little bit lesser of Phil Collins. But what a career, right? And one of my favorite drummers of all
Yeah,
time.
you can't really argue that one too. So you're gonna offend a few thousand proggers, right? But to the masses, all of a sudden Phil Collins is a genius. Yeah, so that's a tough
Yeah.
one.
Yeah. And Dee Snider with We Are the Ones. I think that was him doing his pop, dancey, industrial sort of situation as well. The Miles Goodwin solo album, we just lost Miles, but that proved that he was a poppier guy even than April Wine, which was quite poppy. And he's running April Wine, right? But that was a very glossy sort of record. The Ricky Medlock and Blackfoot, I always think of that as just like the Joe Perry one I showed. Like, as it gets further into the thing, it just gets worse, right? It gets bizarre. Like, why are you making these kinds of records? Okay, so I got a really contentious one. I'll leave the contentious one for a second. So the Michael Schenker thank you situation. I mean, I think we all worried about his mental health when he was doing these things, these weird thank you albums, right? And Bella Piper's involved and all this kind of weird stuff, right? So it was reputation destroying in that it was almost like destroying of what we thought of him as a person. We were concerned with him doing all these weird acoustic albums, just calling him thank you, and just these strange indie releases and changing band names all the time. So here's a contentious one that I almost don't want to bring up. It's almost an episode in itself, and I hope this rant doesn't go on too long, but I'm in the middle of doing a Thin Lizzy panel book, right? So this is like one of those books like the Blue Oyster Cult, where it's just a panel of people talking all about this band. And I just finished, coincidentally, editing the chapter on Black Rose. Gary Moore is a funny case, someone I want to bring up, and I know this is going to upset a lot of people, but well, first off, nobody likes the Gary Moore band Grinding Stone album. I think this caused a bit of a problem with his reputation as well. This was just a little pert and poppy and that sort of thing. And all these people in this chapter are praising Gary Moore so much. And I walked around the other day and I was listening through all the albums we're all supposed to like and the ones everybody likes, right? All those heavy albums that he did, the heavy metal years where we think he doesn't even want to be there anyways, kind of shows, because those records are terribly produced. I think the performances aren't good on them. I don't think the songs are good on them. I think they're way more hair metal-y than people remember. I personally, when I think of the whole Gary Moore catalog, I mean, Black Rose is way up in one of my favorite Lizzy albums. But even then, listening to the entire rest of the Gary Moore oeuvre, I'm almost like of this controversial opinion that I think that album's so good because of Phil and Scott more than Gary. People really go overboard, I think, in praising Gary on these things. I'm not even crazy about him as a guitar soloist, believe it or not, right? I know it's nuts. It's nuts. But but I went through all those records. I could almost see doing a 2-hour rant episode with you and someone else who wants to defend this stuff and literally go through the songs and go, man, his tone on those heavy albums is so screechy and overbearing. The drums sound horrible. Not crazy about his voice. So when it comes down to it, my favorite version of Gary Moore is the George Thorogood version of Gary Moore. I like those later, really rambunctious and lively and very cool blues albums. It sounds like he wants to be there. But I gotta tell you, okay, so let's leave all that the hate part of it aside and just pull back into the episode. I think G-Force and Gary Moore band Grinding Stone, man, that was just, just not the way to make a record, right? Kind of thing. And not the way to name your band either. That whole thing, the Gary Moore band thing, right? Oh yeah, okay. So I had a couple more here. Freddie Mercury Barcelona with Montserrat Cabal. Reputation destroying. I don't know. Maybe it's kind of neutral, but it's weird that he's doing this. I really thought Peter Gabriel came down a little bit in my estimation when he did the Scratch My Back album, the covers by other artists 2010, and New Blood, the orchestral re-recordings. I thought he was cooler than that he wasn't going to do these kind of stupid things, but he went and did those stupid things. He's completely redeemed himself, came back with IO, and that's awesome, right? The Roger Waters opera album, Saira, John Lennon rock and roll, right? When these guys go off and do these stupid standard 60s and 50s standards things. Diano is a good one. I think that ruined his reputation with the rockers. That was kind of like trying to be, a commercially hair metal-y, keyboardy kind of band. Ronnie Montrose Open Fire. I think nobody really wanted Ronnie to leave a band situation. Montrose had so much promise, and here he is going off and he's starting this whole thing. Granted, it was well received as one of the early, one of these instrumental albums. And I think a great late addition that's perfect for this one is Keith Moon, Two Sides of the Moon, right? It's considered one of the most horrible solo albums of all time. And people laugh about it and joke about it and really didn't expect much of it, and it was more of a party than anything. But yeah, even the making of that record is a crazy story. So that's a reputation destroying one too. But there you go. That's my that category.
All right. Not to derail the conversation, but I'm gonna have to defend Gary Moore a little bit here.
Yeah, but this is one where I almost like we can't do it on the show because I would love to sit down with someone and be able to play these songs and go, show me the good songs on these heavy albums, because I ain't finding them, right? It just song after song after song was just like cheesy and cliched, and the fast ones were annoying. The mid-pace ones were hair metal or bad hair metal. The drumming was bad. The drum sounds were bad. It's like, oh man.
Ian Pace is bad, Martin. Come on.
Well, okay. Well,
The Power and Victims of the Future are two of the best guitar albums of the 80s.
Well, I would love to go through all those guitar solos and because so this is one I remember. I still remember, and it still bothers me when I got all upset about Tommy Bolin and I think I ticked off Butch on that show. But I would love to hear a really eloquent, because again, even in this Thin Lizzy book, everybody's praising Gary Moore to the hills, and people talked about his aggressiveness, but that doesn't make a great soloist to me. And I thought his tone, I mean, that's down to producers, and it doesn't sound particularly wild or great. I mean, when I think of tones, there's 5 or 6 other guys, but yeah, just oh man, this screechy, stratty sort of tone across those records. They are brash, those albums. But I went for a long walk and I was playing all of them and going, why did I like these records? So I don't know. Yeah, I don't know.
This might be a point counterpoint conversation for another day.
Yeah.
I will defend those forever. I love those albums. I think his tone is amazing, whether he's playing a million notes or just 4. Man, when I hear Gary, I know it's Gary. And anyway.
All right, we'll leave it at that for now.
All right, let's go. How about not quite solo albums, right? So more of like a a collaboration, a duo type of thing. I mean, we could have even expanded this category to these. They're listed as a solo album, but 3/4 of the band that they're in plays on the album. So it's basically just like a band album. We decided not to just go overboard here. So we're going to talk about basically the duo albums, right? It's kind of a solo album, but it's a collaboration. Tyler, be quiet. Um, so yeah, so we'll start off with Iommi Hughes, right? So you got the Depth Sessions and you got Fused, right? It's got the Iommi name on it, but basically this is the two of them doing really good albums together. Awesome stuff. We got Gillan and Glover, right? Is it a solo album for Ian Gillan or Roger Glover? It's kind of a collaboration between the two. Interesting album, this. We talked about how Roger and his solo stuff doesn't do anything that sounds like Deep Purple, and we listed a couple of Ian Gillan solo albums. This kind of takes them into altogether different waters, right? This totally different. I don't have a prop, but the Storm Corrosion album.
Greatest song Roger ever did was The Mask from The Mask. I love that song.
Yeah,
So
it's a
cool.
good one.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good one. He's a really good songwriter. I mean, and good arranger. I mean, I think he was responsible for a lot of the stuff on those Joe Lynn Turner Rainbow albums. I think he had a lot to do with how those songs were put together and whatnot. Storm Corrosion, of course. Here you got Michael Ackerfeld from Opeth and Stephen Wilson from Porcupine Tree. Essentially collaboration. Doesn't sound anything like either band that they came from. You got Demons and Wizards, of course, John Schaefer, and from Blind Guardian, I'm drawing a blank on his name.
Oh yeah, Henzy Kirsch.
Yeah, Kirsch. Yep. You got Mick Hunter or there's Hunter and Ronson, Mick Ronson and Mr. Hunter. Awesome stuff there. Whitford St. Holmes, right? We, of course, thinking we would get a solo album from Brad Whitford away from Aerosmith, and instead he hooked up with Derek St. Holmes from Ted Nugent's band. Really, really good album, essentially a duo album. You got Hughes Thrall. All right, of course, you got Pat after Pat Travers' band. You got Glenn is trying to find his way after Deep Purple. This is pre-Black Sabbath, pre-working with Gary Moore. Cool stuff there. You got, let's see, Page and Plant, right? Of course, from the mighty Led Zeppelin. You got the Head Cats featuring Lemmy. You got an interesting album called Squack It, which is basically Chris Squire and Steve Hackett coming together. One legend from Yes, one legend from Genesis. Let's just shorten the names and call it Squack It. You got John Anderson actually did a series of albums with Vangelis. Okay, the great Greek composer and keyboard player. You got the Wet and Downs albums, all right. Of course, trying to do something away from the Asia theme. Jorn Landy and Russell Allen. Of course, Jorn, the great singer, has been in a lot of bands, got a really great solo career, band called Jorn. Russell Allen, of course, from Symphony X, the Allen Landy albums are very, very cool, very, very different for both guys, more power metal type stuff. You've got this, which, it's not quite a Robin Trower solo album or solo band. It's actually Robin Trower and Jack Bruce. So what commonly called the BLT band, Bruce, Lord, and Trower. Excellent, excellent stuff there. Here's one, Coverdale Page. So basically, Zeppelin's not doing anything. Whitesnake's put on hold. Let's get these two guys together to do the Coverdale Page album. Very, very successful album there. We've got the Van Zant band, which is basically the two brothers, Donnie and Johnny. A lot of cool stuff there. A lot of albums. They continue to do collaborations even up to this day. We've got, how about the Ram album featuring Paul McCartney and Linda McCartney. So Paul had already released a solo album. Wings is not quite a thing yet after the Beatles breakup. So here he does a kind of a Paul solo album with his wife for Ram. We've got Pete Townsend and Ronnie Lane doing the Rough Mixes album. We've got basically the Alan Parsons Project. There you go. And this is basically Alan Parsons and Eric Wolfson starting a new project type thing. And, they would have lots of recurring musicians and collaborators on here, fairly constant throughout most of the career. But these two guys were always the head of this thing. So that's kind of, it's more, even though it's got the Alan Parsons name on it, that's always been more of like a duo thing. You got Martin, you want to go any honorables here?
Yeah, okay. Here's a good honorable mention that's perfect for this. Manitoba's Wild Kingdom and You, which is essentially a Dictators album. But yeah, they put it under Dick Manitoba's name. Um, let's see what else we got. Yeah, did you just mention Richard and Linda Thompson? Or
No.
no? Okay, Pour Down Like Silver, First Light, all of that stuff. John Lennon with Yoko, Wedding Album, Plastic Ono Band, Sometime in New York City, Double Fantasy. Any Springsteen album without the E Street Band, any Tom Petty album without the Heartbreakers. Kind of the concept here with this one was it's still the star. It might be this is a case where a guy's making a solo album and there are these other pieces to the puzzle, but some of them are famous enough that you kind of want to put their name on it as well or whatever,
Yeah.
right? Or
Yeah.
you compromise the name of the band like Manitoba's Wild Kingdom, possibly because there are other names that are almost as big as the big band sort of thing. So yeah, there's a lot of duo albums here, but again, kind of the idea is that secondary star. It still feels like it's one of those guys' his personality is shining more than the other in almost every
Yeah.
case, sort of thing.
And you
uh,
have to wonder how many of these were originally supposed to be a true solo album featuring only one of them. And
yeah,
then the other guy kind of came on board, and before you know it, it becomes like the both names are in the marquee type of thing.
yeah. All right, so our last category is kind of a fun one. It's like people we would like to have seen a solo album from. Please make a solo album, that kind of idea, right? Yeah, we've got some big heavy hitters here, of course. um you know Brian Johnson from AC/DC. I would have loved to have gotten a solo album out of him. What is that song called? Back on the Chain Gang, Chain, whatever. He did this um what do you call it? Charity song, right? I think Phil Rudd or Cliff, somebody's on it besides Brian. It's amazing though. It's like one of the better pure AC/DC sort of songs. I remember he guested on the Jackal album as well and did that amazing song there. But yeah, great job of it. So yeah, I would love to see him make more music. And in a parallel universe, if he had been one of those kind of guys that oh my god, I gotta always be busy, I gotta be always making albums. Look how few AC/DC albums we got. They got spread out so much that there could have been 5 Brian Johnson solo albums along the way, right? And when his voice was still young, right? So we could have gotten a lot of them, but of course we know that's a very close shop, and they probably would not have approved of that happening at all, kind of thing. Protect the brand, right? Um, Jim Morrison, that would have been amazing to have gotten solo albums out of Jim along the way, right? Um, and one of Pete's favorite, Don Van Vliet, Captain Beefheart. That's a band situation, but what in the world would a solo album from him have sounded like? Could we have gotten something maybe quite a bit more commercial, using that amazing voice of his that Pete loves so much? But he can be behaved too with that voice. He can be a beautiful conservative blues man with that voice as well. It's a really cool voice. But
I can
yeah,
tolerate him, once on every couple of Frank Zappa albums he sings a song, like
yeah,
I think,
that's true. That
every
is a
now and
good
then a
use of
whole
them.
album of him though just like drives me bananas. So
Yeah. Here's one that's kind of interesting. Peter Fredette from the Kim Mitchell Band, with that amazing voice when he does those duet vocals with Kim. For all I know, he's got 5 solo albums out, and I haven't even checked, but I don't think so. I mean, to have had him, and he's a great bassist as well. But yeah, what a voice on him. Solo album, he could have been a big star. That I do know. He's not a big star, but he could have been with that voice. So yeah, Peter Fredette from that band. Mick Jones from The Clash and Big Audio Dynamite. I love Mick's voice. He's obviously a guitarist and a singer. I would have loved to have had some really traditional albums out of him, maybe something more guitar-y or something a little folky or Americana-y or something. I don't know. But essentially, Clash's 3 different bands across whatever it is, 6 records, and then this is basically like Cut the Crap or Earthquake Weather or even Mescalero's somewhat version of, like, this is very getting into hip hop and electronics and dub and all that sort of stuff. So this is way off of what the Clash was, but yeah, to have had more really cool traditional albums out of Mick Jones would have been cool. Another one of my favorite bands of all time, The Damned, to have gotten Dave Vanian albums would have been really cool. I mean, he's got a couple solo-y sort of things, but he's just got one of the most amazing voices. He's a super smart guy, writes really cool lyrics. To have had a great Dave Vanian catalog would have been cool. This guy here, love him to death, Tank, Algie Ward, right? All of these Tank albums. We lost Algie. He was a troubled guy, but he made these albums, these later Tank albums, that the songwriting is to die for. It is so great metal, even though there's like drum machine on them. Although on one of them, at least, it doesn't really even sound like drum machine. But there are a couple absolutely obscure, you can barely get them. They were barely released Tank albums that he did later on. We know Tank goes on, but Algie is such an amazing force, a creative force for writing. Of course, he was in The Damned, which is amazing to me. He was in The Saints, which is also amazing to me. But yeah, to have had more records out of Algie, call them solo albums, whatever you want, that would have been cool as well. Let's see, who else do we got here? Dave Murray from Iron Maiden. We don't know much about him. He doesn't write very much. So like, hey, show us your personality. Let's see, Axl Rose, a massive star that people think is a bit of an enigma. What would an Axl Rose solo album sound like?
How in the world that's never happened is beyond me.
Exactly. Yeah, it is kind of bizarre. Yeah, exactly. Richie Blackmore. What would a Richie album sound like, right? Kurt Cobain. Some of these you wonder, do we really need them, sort of thing. I think a Kurt Cobain album would sound like a mellow stonery Nirvana album. I'd rather have Nirvana albums, sort of things. I'll leave you with a few of these honorable mentions, but a couple more before we go on. James Hetfield, right? James Hetfield brings up a really good point. I mean, almost everybody on my list, most people on my list, you got to have those vocals. I think these solo albums by non-singers just usually come out to be a little bit of a mess. Or even if they do the right thing and pick one singer, it's like, now I feel like it's like that singer's album, right? The Geezer Butler albums feel like it's the singer's the most important guy, right? So yeah, the neat thing about a James Hetfield one is that you're going to get, James as a singer and a writer and as a guitarist. We probably all worry that it's going to sound like the mellow stuff on Load and Reload, maybe. You're right. It could be kind of country-ish, right? For all we know, right? So yeah, we're not sure we want that album, but no. I'm gonna my favorite one out of all these is a late entry, and it literally is my first choice. The Godly Eric Bloom. Man, Eric Bloom's solo albums, that would be a pretty cool thing, because he's kind of got this reputation. We don't know if it's correct or not, but he's got this reputation as being maybe one of the rockers in the band. It would blow my mind to get one or two or three Eric Bloom solo albums. That would be really, really cool. So
with only his voice, with just his voice on every song, right?
Exactly. Yeah, you sing every song. Absolutely, right? And play guitar, write some lyrics, co-write with some other guys, use some of those Blue Oyster Cult guys as well, who are part of the family. But that is my absolute number one choice. Who else did I have here? Ray Gillan. I had Johnny Rotten on here, but I don't know. Anybody to add?
Well, the one you missed on your list, which I think is very intriguing, that's Angus Young.
Right?
I mean, because it goes back to what you were talking about the voice. So if you have an Angus Young solo record, he's not going to do an instrumental album, right? Yeah. So who's the voice there? Can anybody envision an Angus Young solo album without Brian Johnson or someone who sounds, similar? I don't know.
But I worry it would be a blues album or a rock and roll album or something like that, right? It'd be nice if somebody here proved us, surprised us, and turned out to be like a raging metalhead or something, right? And did a super metal album, right? So
yeah. A couple others I thought of. I always thought it would be really cool to hear a Vivian Campbell solo album.
We do have one though, I think, don't we? Don't we have a bluesy sort of album from him?
I don't know. I've never heard if he has one. I
Yeah,
mean, he's done these, like he did the Shadow King album with Lou Gramm. He did the River Dogs thing, but I don't. Is there a Vivian
I
Campbell
think
solo?
so. Yeah, and I bet we're going to be proven wrong on a few of these, right? Or
Which is
someone's going to say,
possible.
oh,
Yeah.
they got a sort of solo album, right? Sort of thing.
Yeah.
It blows my mind when I feel so bad when I look up some of my favorite bands and realize, oh, they've got 4 more albums I didn't even know about, kind of thing, right?
There's just so much out there to take in. So
Yeah.
much. I mean, here's one that just came to me as we were talking that we really haven't. I mean, an Eddie Van Halen solo album, which everybody has always wanted. And again, Van Halen had all this downtime, and now he's gone. It's like that just never happened. It's like that to me. That's like one of the biggest misses out of all of these.
Yeah.
Another one for me. I mean, Terry Kath from Chicago would have loved to have had a solo album from him outside of that band. I'd like to eventually hear a Mike Portnoy solo album. Here's the guy who plays with everybody, but we want to hear Mike with all his stuff, right? And just do, put together, a good lineup of musicians and just do something that you want to do. I mean, not that he doesn't do what he wants to do, but I think that would be cool. What would it be like to hear a Rudolph Schenker solo album? How about a Mick Box solo album without the keyboards of Uriah Heep, just an all-out, balls-out rock album from Mick Box? That might be kind of neat too. I'm sure there's plenty of others that we never got solo albums
Yeah.
before, but I don't know. You have anything else to add?
Yeah, a couple more. I mean, when you bring up Rudolph, Matthias Jab's solo album would be
Yeah,
cool.
hell yeah, yeah.
When you bring up Eddie Van Halen, I mean, I want to hear more from Alex Van Halen in any way possible. He's just so quiet, right? We don't hear him talk, we don't hear him make music. But yeah, I mean, his drumming is just a joy. It'd be really cool to hear what he would want to do. And of course, Michael Anthony could
Yeah,
sing
why
his own
not?
solo album, right?
Yeah,
So
yeah.
that is amazing, right? I mean, I think people would be really excited about a Michael Anthony solo album, right? And then, just the overall point of this is that Mike Portnoy is a perfect example where it's like, why we want these things is we assume, and what we want and what we hope it is that this is the best expression of your own personality, and you're revealing who you really are and what you're really like to us, kind of thing. And that's really a cool thing about this solo album idea, like the curiosity of knowing if these guys had their way and could put together 12 or 14 songs or whatever, what would they do, right?
Yeah, I mean, Portnoy is an interesting choice, right? Because he's worked with so many other people and so many other bands, and all of them are very different from each other. So you have to wonder, is everything that he wants to express in music, has it already been done in all these other outlets? Or is he holding back on something that maybe one day will come to fruition in a solo album? I don't
Yeah.
know. I would love to ask him that one of these days when I have him on and I'm talking to him, because he's done the prog thing, he's done the bluesy hard rock thing, he's done this, that, and the other thing, prog metal, prog, so it's like he's obviously we know he loves the Beatles and he's done those side projects. He loves the Who. What else does Mike like that he hasn't really explored yet? And would that
Exactly.
be the place to go in a solo album? But then again, it begs the question, well, what if he goes and does a solo album that is so completely left field from everything else? Will the core fan base accept something like that if it's not falling into all these other categories that we know and come to expect and love from Mike Portnoy? That's the difficult thing, right? Because
Yeah.
sometimes a solo album expresses a hidden desire to explore territory that you really love but have never done before and never shown to the public. That can be
Yeah.
risky, right?
And it brings up a point. I'm thinking as you're saying this, it's like, well, I'd like to see a solo album from Mike where he does nothing but play the clarinet or something, right? So and that got me thinking. It's really cool when you see like a Bill Ward and his amazing catalog that people either they don't know about it or they listen to it and go, what is this crap? But there's a core amount of people who say this guy is one of the biggest musical geniuses. And I'm in that camp, right? It's like nobody, there are a number of fans who think this guy is just like walks on water when he makes these bizarre, strange, interesting solo albums. But what's really cool about it, again, there's so many things cool about it, but that extra thing about it is, he occasionally decides not to play the drums. So it's cool when you see these solo albums where they don't do their core thing. And a lot of them are like that. but yeah,
And that's
that's a
hard to
major
market
thing.
from a record label perspective. It's hard to market a Bill Ward solo album where you're not even playing drums, which is what you're known for. You're writing the songs and helping with the and doing the arrangements, and you're maybe singing a good chunk
Yeah,
or most of the album, but
yeah,
you're not doing anything else. It's like, so that's got to be difficult for a record label to say, okay, it's not like, like if Eddie Van Halen did a solo album, right? Of course,
yeah.
he's one of the greatest guitar players of all time. We're going to market it as such. You really can't do that with a Bill Ward because what you're getting is so eclectic and not really delivering what everybody knows him for, right? And that's by choice, by him, right?
Yeah. So I'll just go on record. Bill Ward, solo career, best solo career out of everything we talked about today.
But I mean, but that's what this stuff is all about, right? I think it's trying to find for me, I can appreciate the ones that went out and did something that's really different, right? I mean, as long as it's good, right? It's got to resonate with you. But do we want Bill Ward to do a solo record that sounds exactly like Master of Reality? Not really. Would it be cool? Sure, but that's not. Why do that then? You could just do those songs within the band. So I don't know. Anyway, I'm gonna have to mull over our Gary Moore conversation. I think it's still
Yeah.
sitting there in the back of my mind. I'm like, Jesus, Martin.
Again, though, man, that's one where I would get like really like belligerent and aggressive, and I'd want to be sitting down almost and us playing little bits because I want to be shown, right? Like show me where this great Gary Moore stuff is because I ain't hearing it, right? And you brought up Ian Pace, and it's like I can't remember which albums Ian Pace is on, but I can tell you I went for a long walk and listened to about 5 of those records. It's probably all there is. And I didn't hear any good drumming. I mean, anywhere by any of these superstars, so to speak. So, yeah, it's like you join Gary's band and you just become crappy. I think it's kind of what happened. So yeah, it's a show me situation. It's like okay, well show me this great Tommy Bolin stuff that I'm missing, right? Show me well let's not go into it, but yeah, we
I mean,
need a
not
show situation where we can play things, right?
those albums are all not perfect. I mean, I will give you that. Like, I think the first Gary Moore band album, man, it's okay for what it is. I don't listen to that very often. Uh, the G-Force album for me, I never fully embraced. I know people who love that a lot. I'm not nuts about that. But man, Back in the Streets and Corridors of Power and Victims of the Future and I even like the rest of the albums from the 80s. And I really like the first two blues albums. After a while, it's like, I can only listen to so much of that straight blues, album after album after album. So I kind of lost interest in that a little bit. But the album he did with Jack Bruce and Ginger Baker, I love that album. I think that's really good. I wish he would have done more of that. But so yeah, I mean they're not all perfect albums, but man, his guitar playing just influenced me like so greatly, and I miss him so much. So I listen to those albums very, very fondly. But I personally think that if there was no such person as Eddie Van Halen on the planet, when Gary Moore hit with that, Corridors of Power album, you know, people would have been just wowed to the nth degree if it would have gotten the exposure like a Van Halen did, but never
The
really happened.
photo sessions are very nice. He looks very nice on those albums, right?
But yeah, he's not
They
photogenic
look
either.
very
I mean,
expensive.
Gary's
No,
just
but I'm serious. I almost think like the quality of the photography of Gary on these covers is the most professional thing about those records.
well, yeah, yeah, yeah. And it doesn't come across as like Ingve's photo shoots, right? The Ingve covers. It's just like, look at me, look at me, look at me. Because I know for a fact Gary's gone on record saying that he didn't want all that attention on him from a physical aspect because he got the scars and he's not magazine cover material. He knew that, but I don't know.
Yeah.
I love Gary. Love him.
Well, maybe we could even just read the lyrics back and forth because the lyrics are pretty atrocious too on those records. So
Well, it goes without saying that Gary and later on looked back on that whole period and he was kind of embarrassed by it because it's
yeah.
not really what he wanted to be doing. But so many of us love it and so many of us don't, but
See, Gary proved to have good taste. Yeah.
I've got Ends of the World, the guitar solo going in the back of my brain right now. It's like, yeah, baby. Anyway, Martin, get us caught up on what's happening with all of your outlets here in this holiday week.
Well, all the books, of course, are at martinpopoff.com, and there's PayPal buttons there, and I sign them and send them out and all that kind of stuff. I've turned in my next episode of the audio podcast, History in 5 Songs. So it looks like I won't be missing a week over Christmas. So I did that one early. What the heck did I do it on again? I can't remember. The last one was They Shrunk the Boogie, but okay, I forget. Anyways, there's another one coming to that. And that's it. It was first gear singers. That was it. Yeah, it was singers who excel and kind of stick with, and they're known for keeping it in first gear, kind of thing. That was what that was about. Contrarians. We've got one going up. I interviewed yesterday David K. Teds from our private email group. Right. I thought it was pretty interesting that he was there on the ground for all these early heavy metal albums, like the first Zeppelin and the first Sabbath and all that. So we had a long chat. So that's going to be going up. So lots of Contrarians things going up all the time. So that's our video channel, and yeah, that's everything.
Cool. I do want to mention Martin and I both appear in Tim Derling's new book on Y&T, and that just came out. I am reading it as we speak, and I hope to have Tim on the show within a week or two to kind of talk about the book and whatnot. And Martin and I, like I said, both contributed to that. It was a lot of fun, really cool book on a band that not a lot of people talk about, Y&T. So go check that out. More information coming here on the channel about that. Martin, do we want to give them a little tidbit for next week? Ear candy?
Oh, that's right. Yeah, that's the one we're doing. Yeah.
Yes.
So yeah, we're talking about the various ways that bands use to their advantage in various kinds of ear candy. So we'll come up with some categories on that, hopefully, and yeah, celebrate silly, stupid noises that we all like.
Yes, yes, because sometimes silly, stupid noises add a lot to albums that we all love, right? So, and I think we'll be talking about lots of different albums next week, right? Because Martin and I are very conscious about not trying to talk about the same albums over and over and over again. And I think this is kind of a cool concept because I think we all take for granted some of these cool things that are utilized in some classic albums and maybe not so classic albums that kind of give you that warm and fuzzy thing as they're going through the eardrums and through the brain and everything. So yeah, all right, coming up here on the channel, we've got the Professor's Picks in just a couple hours, so stay tuned for that. And Sunday, Rick Labonte, who's back from his long vacation trip, he and I will be ranking our top 10 favorite Guess Who albums on Sunday. So, and that will be, of course, on Christmas Eve. But no, we won't be taping it on Christmas Eve because I will be off with family for a couple days. So, but yeah, hopefully everybody enjoys the Christmas break. And we'll see you all 1 week from today here at the Funhouse. Visit us on the web at www.seaoftranquility.org. We're on Facebook. We're on YouTube. All together, all the damn time. Please subscribe if you haven't already. And click on that notification bell so you get alert of all of our content as it posts. And please do hit the like button before you leave. For Martin Popoff, I am Pete Pardo. Merry Christmas, everybody.
Absolutely, folks. Merry Christmas.
Take care. Bye-bye.